A venture capitalist once told a room of entrepreneurs that he can predict who'll succeed financially within 90 seconds of meeting them. Not by looking at their business plan, not by checking their credentials, by watching how they order coffee. He claims an 87% accuracy rate over 2 decades of investing. Sounds absurd, right? But here's what's unsettling. Behavioral economists have identified 18 specific psychological tells that reveal someone's relationship with money more accurately than their bank statement ever could. We broadcast our money personality constantly. Every purchasing decision, every moment of hesitation, every justification we make to ourselves creates a pattern, and patterns are predictable. Psychologists call this behavioral leakage. It's the concept that our internal mental models about money seep out through micro-behaviors we're barely conscious of. Your relationship with money isn't just reflected in what you buy. It's in how you buy, when you buy, what you say immediately after you buy. Consider how someone reacts when a restaurant bill arrives. Some people immediately reach for it. Others physically lean back. Some suggest splitting it before anyone else speaks. Others go silent and wait. Each response reveals a different money script playing in their head. These money scripts are psychological frameworks we develop in childhood, shaped by how our parents handled finances, what we were taught about scarcity and abundance, and the emotional weight we've attached to spending and saving. As Brad Klontz and Ted Klontz explain in their research on financial psychology, most people operate from one of 4 core money beliefs: money avoidance, money worship, money status, or money vigilance. But here's what makes this fascinating. Most people think their financial behavior is rational. They believe they're making logical decisions based on their circumstances. In reality, they're running unconscious programs written decades ago. The dinner bill reaction? That's not about the money. It's about what grabbing the check signals about generosity, control, or worthiness. The hesitation? That's not about affordability. It's about an internal conflict between the desire to appear successful and a deeply rooted fear of not having enough. What venture capitalists, experienced salespeople, and financial therapists have learned is that these tells are remarkably consistent. Someone who displays money vigilance behaviors in small transactions will almost certainly display them in major financial decisions. Someone who uses money for status will do it whether they're buying a coffee or a car. The coffee shop prediction isn't magic. It's pattern recognition. Does someone order confidently without checking prices? Do they justify their choice aloud? Do they mention the cost unprompted? Do they compare what others ordered before deciding? Each behavior maps to a predictable financial psychology profile, and once you understand what to look for, you start seeing these patterns everywhere. In yourself, in your partner, in your colleagues. The question is, what are your behaviors revealing about you? In 2015, a private equity firm was evaluating 2 startup founders for a Series A investment. Both companies had similar traction, comparable teams, and reasonable valuations. The investment committee was split. Then, one of the partners noticed something during the pitch meetings. Founder A wore expensive sneakers, a luxury watch, and had recently posted photos from a first-class flight to a conference. Founder B wore the same Patagonia quarter-zip to both meetings and drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic, despite having successfully exited a previous company. The firm invested in Founder B. The company was later acquired for $340 million. Founder A's company burned through their runway and shut down 18 months later. This wasn't luck. It was reading financial psychology tells. Founder A was displaying what researchers call present bias, combined with status-seeking behavior. The luxury items weren't about personal preference. They were signals, and signals are expensive. Morgan Housel writes in The Psychology of Money about how true wealth is what you don't see. It's the cars not purchased, the watches not worn, the upgrades declined. Wealth is hidden. It's income not spent. But the need to signal success? That's often inversely correlated with actual financial security. The Patagonia vest became a meme in Silicon Valley, but there's psychological truth beneath the joke. The most successful tech founders and investors often dress indistinguishably from their interns. Mark Zuckerberg's gray t-shirts, Steve Jobs' black turtlenecks. It's not just about simplifying decisions. It's about where they direct their financial and psychological energy. Founder A was spending mental calories managing an image. Every purchase was a statement. That same psychology shows up in business decisions. Fancy offices before profitability. Premium pricing because that's what we're worth. First-class flights justified as representing the brand. Founder B's 7-year-old Civic wasn't about being cheap. It was about having clear priorities. When you're not spending energy maintaining a financial image, you can direct that focus toward building actual value. The private equity partner who noticed this had learned to read what he called capital allocation tells. How people spend in low-stakes situations predicts how they'll allocate in high-stakes ones. Someone who optimizes for appearance in personal purchases will optimize for appearance in business decisions. Someone who optimizes for function and value will carry that framework into company strategy. By 2019, this pattern recognition had become formalized in their due diligence process. They started tracking what they called founder lifestyle indicators, not to judge character, but to predict decision-making psychology. And the correlation held. Founders who displayed high status-seeking behavior had companies that consistently overspent on branding, office space, and customer acquisition before achieving product-market fit. Founders who displayed money vigilance launched leaner, reached profitability faster, and made more strategic hires. The coffee shop prediction had scaled to 8-figure investments. In 2004, researchers at the University of Cambridge conducted a study on financial decision-making and physiological responses. They tracked traders, cortisol levels, heart rate variability, and micro-expressions during market volatility. What they discovered challenged the idea that successful investors are simply more rational. The best performers weren't less emotional. They had different emotional tells. When facing potential losses, average traders showed increased cortisol, faster blinking, and what researchers called decision paralysis indicators. The top performers showed brief cortisol spikes, followed by rapid physiological regulation. Their tells revealed emotional awareness and control, not emotional absence. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's prospect theory explains why this matters. We feel losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains. This asymmetry creates predictable behavioral patterns. When someone faces a potential financial loss, their psychological response leaks through their behavior. Increased risk aversion, faster speech, justification language, physical withdrawal. But here's where it gets interesting. Different money personalities have different loss aversion tells. Someone with money vigilance might immediately start calculating and become hyperverbal about numbers. Someone with money avoidance might emotionally detach and suggest, "It's just money." Someone with money worship might deny the loss and increase risk-taking to recover quickly. Researchers in behavioral economics have identified specific linguistic patterns that correlate with financial behaviors. People who frequently use absolutist language like always and never when discussing money tend to have more rigid financial behaviors and struggle with adaptation. People who use tentative language like maybe and possibly often display decision paralysis in financial contexts. There's a fascinating tell around timeframe language. Listen to how people talk about money across time horizons. Someone might say, "I'll start investing next year," or "Once I pay off this debt, then I'll save." This reveals what psychologists call temporal discounting, the tendency to devalue future benefits in favor of immediate gratification. The specific words matter less than the pattern. Chronic future orientation around positive financial behaviors, quote, "I'll start saving when," combined with present orientation around spending, quote, "I deserve this now," is one of the most reliable predictors of financial instability. Paul Piff at UC Berkeley studied how wealth affects behavior and found that even temporary feelings of wealth change how people behave in measurable ways. In experiments where people were randomly assigned to feel rich or poor, those primed to feel wealthy displayed more entitled behavior, less empathy, and different risk tolerance within minutes. This means financial tells aren't just about actual wealth. They're about perceived wealth, financial anxiety, and money identity. Someone who constantly mentions prices is revealing financial consciousness. Someone who never mentions prices might be revealing either abundance or avoidance. Context determines meaning. The most reliable tells combine multiple signals. Linguistic patterns plus purchasing behavior plus reaction to price changes plus conversation comfort around money. No single tell is definitive. But patterns create profiles, and And profiles predict behavior with uncomfortable accuracy. High-end retailers train their sales associates to read financial tells within seconds of a customer entering the store. It's not profiling by appearance, it's profiling by behavior. Former luxury sales associates describe a system of behavioral categorization that happens unconsciously. How does someone walk into the store? Do they touch merchandise immediately, or keep their hands to themselves? Do they ask about prices first, or features first? Do they shop alone or with someone? Each data point builds a psychological profile. The most valuable customers, according to these systems, aren't the ones who appear wealthiest. They're the ones displaying what sales psychologists call status anxiety. These customers show subtle tells. They justify purchases aloud before anyone questions them. They mention other luxury brands they own. They ask what celebrities or wealthy people buy. They're seeking external validation. This is the money personality that luxury brands optimize for. Not actual wealth, but the psychological need to signal wealth. Someone secure in their financial position doesn't need a logo. Someone building an identity through consumption seeks the most visible markers possible. Robert Cialdini's research on influence and persuasion shows how powerful social proof is in decision-making. Luxury brands exploit this by creating artificial scarcity, waitlists, and exclusivity. But here's the psychological twist. These tactics only work on specific money personalities. Someone with money vigilance sees a waitlist and thinks, "That's manufactured demand. I'll find better value elsewhere." Someone with money status sees the same waitlist and thinks, "That's proof of desirability. I need to be on that list." Same information, opposite psychological processing. In 2018, a luxury automotive brand conducted internal research on their customer psychology. They found their highest margin customers displayed a specific pattern. They researched extensively, but made decisions quickly when given social proof. These buyers would spend weeks comparing specifications, then purchase within hours of learning that a celebrity or executive owned the same model. The brand restructured their entire sales approach around this tell. Sales associates were trained to identify external validation seekers through conversation patterns and then deploy social proof at the optimal psychological moment. This approach increased conversion rates by 34% among high-margin customers. But here's what makes this ethically complex. The customers most susceptible to these tactics are often the ones who can least afford the purchases. Research on consumer debt shows that status-driven consumption is inversely correlated with actual net worth. The people buying luxury items to signal success are often financing those signals with debt. The people who can afford luxury items without financial stress often don't need the psychological validation these items provide. It's a cruel economic paradox. Some companies exploit this. Others recognize it and choose different approaches. Patagonia encourages customers not to buy their products unless needed. They repair items for free. They've built a brand around anti-consumption. But notice, this appeals to a different money personality. Someone seeking status through anti-status. Conspicuous non-consumption as its own signal. Even when we think we're above these psychological patterns, we're often just displaying a different variation of the same underlying need. To have our financial identity validated externally. The tells change. The psychology doesn't. The most important person whose financial tells you need to read is yourself. Because you're leaving clues everywhere. Start with your justification patterns. Pay attention to what you say out loud when making purchases. Do you explain why you deserve this? Do you mention sales or discounts unprompted? Do you compare your purchase to someone else's spending? These aren't random thoughts. They're your internal money scripts becoming external. If you find yourself saying, "I work hard, I deserve this," you're revealing a compensation mindset. You're using purchases to balance some perceived inequity. The danger isn't treating yourself occasionally. It's when this becomes your primary financial framework. Every purchase becomes justified by suffering, and your spending scales with your stress rather than your financial goals. If you mention discounts or sales without being asked, you're seeking external validation for financial prudence. You want witnesses to your smart decision. This isn't about saving money. It's about being seen as someone who saves money. The tell reveals that your financial behavior is audience dependent. Here's a practical exercise. For 1 week, notice your physical response when checking your bank balance. Do you feel a tightness in your chest? A sense of relief? Avoidance? Numbness? Your physiological response reveals your underlying relationship with money more honestly than any budget spreadsheet. Money vigilance creates anxiety and checking behaviors. Money avoidance creates physical discomfort and delay tactics. Money worship creates dopamine seeking and compulsive checking after purchases. Money status creates comparison behaviors and social media validation seeking. Now notice your conversation patterns. How quickly do you mention prices when talking about purchases? Someone who immediately mentions, "I got this for only," is revealing price consciousness as part of their identity. Someone who never mentions prices might be revealing either abundance or discomfort with financial transparency. Morgan Housel notes in The Psychology of Money that doing well with money isn't necessarily about what you know. It's about how you behave. And behavior change requires awareness of your current patterns. You can't modify tells you don't recognize. Here's the framework. Track your financial decisions for 30 days. But instead of tracking amounts, track your emotional and psychological tells. When you decided not to buy something, what was the internal dialogue? When you splurged, what justified it? When you felt financial anxiety, what triggered it? Patterns will emerge. Maybe you spend more after social comparisons. Maybe you become rigid after feeling out of control. Maybe you seek purchases after achievements or setbacks. These patterns are your financial psychology blueprint. The venture capitalist from our opening wasn't just reading coffee orders. He was reading confidence, priority clarity, and decision-making frameworks. Does someone know what they want? Or do they seek external validation before choosing? Do they optimize for value, experience, or image? Do they decide quickly or deliberate excessively over low-stakes choices? These same patterns scale. Your tells in a coffee shop predict your tells in career negotiations, investment decisions, and relationship dynamics around money. The stakes change. The psychology doesn't. The goal isn't to eliminate tells. That's impossible. The goal is awareness. When you understand your financial psychology, you can design systems that work with your natural patterns rather than against them. If you have money vigilance, automate savings so anxiety doesn't block action. If you have status-seeking patterns, create private wins that fulfill the same psychological need without financial cost. If you have avoidance patterns, create accountability structures that make transparency less uncomfortable. Your money personality isn't your destiny, but it is your starting point. The entrepreneurs who succeed financially aren't the ones with perfect psychology. They're the ones who recognize their patterns and build around them. Start reading yourself. You're telling a story with every financial decision. The question is whether you're conscious of the plot. If you found these psychological patterns as fascinating as I did, subscribe for more explorations of how our minds actually work when money's involved. Next video, the cognitive bias that makes millionaires and bankrupts people using the exact same strategy.